Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we all deeply believe that fighting forest fires was almost mandatory in terms of forest management. I went through forestry school for 4 years, and when they talked about forest protection, 90% of it was about fires, not about bugs or drought or conditions like that. And I never had a mention when I went through 4 years of forestry school of the role of fire in cleaning out a forest, in rejuvenating it, in just being a part of, it's a part of nature. I mean, hell, the forests were burning for centuries before we came up with this notion that every fire is bad. But on the fires, it's very well organized there. As soon as you were down, the foreman, with the help of anybody suggesting things, would figure out sort of what the hell is this fire going to do? You know, is it burning on the bottom and working its way up the thing? And then we'd find a place that looked safe, bring all our chutes over, pack them in bags, get them out of the fire possible line way, put our food over there. If we had, sometimes it was a 6 or 8 or 16 man fire. They dropped big food crates, you know, for that. And so we'd get all that together. And usually a couple of guys, it was a 16 man that would in charge of getting the camp area sort of set up. And our sleeping bags were just paper insulation from buildings. They would take, and it wasn't even that thick, but they would fold it over and they would sew up the bottom and one side, so you just slid in there. And usually if it was real cold, you stuffed in a parachute for insulation. There were no, you know, what you might see as an actual sleeping bag. So that was just a paper bag. So once the camp was set up, and then you'd get over with your hand tools on the fire, and there was always a method, always a starting place. And once again, we weren't going to, you know, run in like Hollywood at the top of a fire and, you know, and knock big trees down with 3 blows of an axe. You know, would get behind it and we'd start our line around it, and hopefully we could corral the thing in. And it wasn't until my last year that we started having chainsaws. We had crosscut saws, and those were folded into a bow around, yeah, just on themselves. Yeah, they just folded around. There were those huge crosscut saws, and they dropped those. Sometimes they hit, and it's spring steel, so it would snap. So you have 2 saws this long with a handle. What the hell are you going to do with that, you know? So, you know, it was very basic attack, but we controlled, you know, a lot of fires. I was amazed at one shovelful of dirt on a burning, you know, pine or spruce or fir. It would almost knock the fire out of it, you know, just the dirt coming down through it. And I said, amazing. So you go along the fire line, just kind of throw dirt in things, and then the guys behind you could dig a little trench. You know, you just scratch a trench in there, and you know, and you had it. So, and then you know, would stop to eat. But we always tried to control the fire before it got out of hand, because we knew, you know, if you get on the fire and stick some food in your pockets and go with it. And that's one of the things about Man Gulch is, if you read all the stories of it, they lost a lot of time. They had lunch, they were getting their gear together, they were screwing around the upper part, and then they waited for another forest guy to join them. Then they started down. By the time they got down to near where the fire was, that's when it jumped across and it, you know, burned up and caught them. So, you know, we were deadly serious about, let's get on this damn thing, get it at least controlled. It doesn't matter whether the middle of it's roaring, if the edges are controlled, let it burn out, and then, you know, then because you've got it controlled, you know, you're all set. And then, you know, we could take time for, you know, to eat later and relax, because you knew there'd be a ground crew coming in, especially on a bigger fire. So, you know, we were the initial attack, corral it if you can, and then we'll be all set, you know. So, and then the hike out and all, and you know, that was all a part of it. And you know, it was sort of a simple process, really. And it sounds kind of boring. You know, you go on a fire, you control it, you eat some crappy food, and the food was really, they didn't have MREs, but you know, MRE stands for Meals Rejected by Everyone. We had World War II rations, C rations, and then the ones that were dehydrated, and those they didn't use. Those, but these are little cans of food in a box. It was 2 days, 1 day worth of food in a box, including a pack of cigarettes. But it was left over from the military, and the stuff was made in, you know, 44, 45, and this is the 50s, and but it seemed to be all right. None of the cans had swollen, you know. So, but you know, when you're young, I mean, it just comes with it. And we ate. You're supposed to heat it like spaghetti and meatballs and chicken and rice and that kind of stuff that was in these cans. And sometimes we just eat it the way it was. You know, it's sort of, can you prove that you're kind of tough to your 19-year-old friends? You know, and if you've dealt with high school kids a lot, that's sort of how we were. Except for the foreman would be. They're the ones that were the responsible ones. You know, they didn't. We screwed around a bit, you know, on the fire line and doing goofy things, you know. But you know, they did the job and they got us back out, you know, from that. So, but you know, some fires just you know, the best plans for the fire, it's like military. They say, oh, yeah, the plans are perfect, but the execution just goes off the tracks. It doesn't work the way. And I had a friend of mine, a longtime friend, he's the guy that died of ALS. They had a fire up here. It's called Tango Cabin Fire. And some tourists in the Bob Marshall, they did something and they started the cabin on fire. It was a faulty wood stove, but it was a forester's cabin. They shouldn't have been in there. Anyways, the call came in. It was in an opening in the woods, on the forest, near a little pond, and this was going to be a piece of cake fire, because they were going to drop a pumper, gasoline pump engine, with had two inner tubes to seal it. So, and some hose. They were simply going to jump near the cabin. There's plenty of open space. They were going to use the pumper, suck water out of the lake, put the cabin fire out, have a few meals, and then walk out. So Tango Cabin Fire. So they go in. I think there's maybe 6 or 8 of them. 2 or 3 of the guys hung up in big trees and took them a long time to get down. The pumper landed and it damaged it. They could never start the pumper, so that was out. And then by the time they had got out of the trees and got their gear, the fire had spread from the cabin to the forest. And so all they have is hand tools now. And one guy, at least I think he hurt himself, his ankle or whatever. But the thing is, you never know when you played your last card, you might say. And so this fire started to go up, and it was a steep slope, and they did what they could, but it got away from them. So it became a huge project fire as a result of that. And if they'd been there a little bit earlier, if the pumper hadn't broken, if the guys hadn't hung up, it would have been a piece of cake, But that's the way those things happen. And there were crews in there, I think, for the better part of the summer trying to control that. It went to thousands of acres. After I got the fire report on it, but let's say for the record, hundreds of acres. But that was a big fire then. That's how things can go wrong, on a fire. Yeah. And interesting, today compared to back then, most of our fires were really small, And a big fire would be maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 acres. But, you know, today with the dryness and the maturation of the forest, you know, we get these huge fires that go on. You're working on them for weeks, and you know, they're just huge project fires, you know. So, you know, it was kind of a different time. But yeah. Another thing, when I went back east to finish up, nobody was interested in what went on out here. Even the people in forestry school, the profs there, they would say, oh yeah, firefighting. You know, it wasn't tree planting, it wasn't harvesting, it wasn't making a fortune on a big logging operation or selling logging equipment. So it was, you know, it kind of didn't compute. So, that's another thing too, because you have this experience that just sort of stays inside, you know, and you knew what it meant, and you could share it with your buddies that did it, and it took me another decade before I realized how much maturation happened, you know, during that time, and even today when there's something complicated, I just think I can solve that, I can fix that. And a lot of us have said the same thing. You know, there's nothing that, you know, when shit happens, you can get through it. You don't go to pieces, because nobody back then went to pieces. You know, they grumbled and bitched a bit, but we solved it. You know, and so that was it. So the coming of age, that's what it's all about.